One more story this half hour to Pompeii, where archaeologists have revealed officials told the public that the river water was still safe to drink. Many locals remain. For centuries, the Euphrates River has stood at the center of prophecy, empire, and judgment. But now, greater than, as its waters recede at an alarming rate, something unprecedented has happened. An AI-powered drone was sent 5,000 meters beneath a newly exposed section of the riverbed, and what it recorded has left researchers, historians, and believers stunned. Strange vibrations, sealed chambers, ancient weapons, symbols of covenant and judgment rising from mud long undisturbed. Is this merely archaeology, or is it timing? Before we go further, take a moment to like this video, leave your thoughts in the comments, subscribe to the channel, and let's uncover what may be unfolding beneath the Euphrates. As the waters of the Euphrates River continued to retreat, the first signs of something unusual did not appear in stone or metal. They came as sound. Residents living along newly exposed sections of the riverbank began reporting low-frequency vibrations rising from beneath the ground. At first it was subtle. A hum felt more than heard. Then recordings surfaced online, deep guttural tones rolling through the cracked earth, followed by distant, almost mournful wails that seemed to echo from hollow spaces below. Some clips captured what listeners described as whispers carried on windless air. But what unsettled observers most was not the noise itself, it was the pattern. Multiple recordings revealed a consistent rhythm. 3 pulses a pull. Pause, 3 pulses again. Not random, not chaotic, structured. This repetition appeared across different locations along the drying riverbed. The consistency raised a difficult question. Geological movement is rarely rhythmic. So what was producing such measured oscillation? Engineers and geologists quickly proposed explanations. The rapid decline of water levels could be destabilizing underground caverns. Collapsing voids might generate pressure. Waves, shifting sediment layers could produce low-frequency resonance. Underground water channels adjusting to new flow patterns might create vibration, pockets trapped beneath hardened soil. Each explanation was plausible, yet none fully accounted for the steady cadence captured in the recordings. As analysis continued, the discussion expanded beyond geology. For centuries, the Euphrates has carried prophetic weight in Scripture. In the book of Revelation 9:14-15, a passage describes 4 angels bound at the great river Euphrates, reserved for a specific hour, day, month, and year. Moment of release tied to judgment. No scientist confirmed any supernatural interpretation. No official statement suggested anything beyond environmental change. But outside laboratories and research tents, the symbolism was impossible to ignore. A river long associated with restraint is drying. Sounds emerge from beneath. Pulses repeat in measured intervals. Satellite imagery confirms water loss at unprecedented rates. Climate shifts and upstream dam systems provide rational context. Still, when water withdraws from places it has covered for generations, buried, structures are not the only things that surface. Air fills cavities once pressurized by weight. Stone settles, soil fractures, and in that settling sound travels. The question remains unsettled. Are these vibrations simply the earth adjusting to new environmental conditions? Or are they a reminder that when boundaries weaken, what was once held back may begin to stir? For now, the pulses continue, faint, rhythmic, recorded but unexplained, echoing beneath a river that has begun to reveal more than anyone expected. Sounds were not the only things rising from beneath the river. As survey teams continued mapping exposed sections of the Euphrates River, metallic reflections began appearing through layers of hardened silt. At first, they were mistaken for debris, fragments of scrap carried downstream in modern times. But once carefully extracted, the truth became harder to dismiss. Bronze iron spearheads, corroded sword blades, war relics long buried under shifting currents. Carbon analysis and metallurgical studies suggested some of these weapons dated back more than 2,000 years, potentially aligning with periods of conflict during the era of ancient Israel and surrounding empires. The craftsmanship reflected early Iron Age forging techniques, transitional metallurgy where bronze and iron overlapped in use. These were not ceremonial ornaments. They were built for combat, Their location raised immediate questions. The Euphrates was not merely a water source. It was a boundary line between civilizations. Empires crossed it. Armies fought beside it. Treaties were sworn near it. Blood once stained ground at the river later covered. Over centuries, water concealed what conflict had left behind. Steel and mud now tell the story of buried violence. Two primary hypotheses emerged. The first is straightforward. These are remnants of forgotten battles. Armies clashed, soldiers fell. Weapons were lost in retreat or swept away by floods. Over time, the sediment sealed them in place until environmental decline exposed them once again. The second theory moves into symbolic territory. Some historians note that rivers in the ancient Near East often marked covenant boundaries. Oaths were sworn by water. In certain traditions, laying down weapons before a deity symbolized surrender or purification. Could these spearheads represent an intentional act? Warriors abandoning arms before God. A ritual renunciation of violence at the river's edge. There is no inscription confirming such intent. No tablet declaring ceremony. Only metal corroded yet intact, surfacing at a moment when the river itself is retreating. The visual contrast is difficult to ignore. Weapons of war emerging from waters long associated with covenant and cleansing. As sinkholes widen and sediment collapses, more artifacts continue to appear. Each blade carries silence, but together they suggest conflict once, fierce enough to leave its mark beneath the current. When the earth collapses, the past rises with it. And if what we are seeing is only the beginning, what else remains hidden deeper beneath the riverbed? Stay with us, because what surfaces next may challenge everything we thought we understood about what lies below. Deep within a partially flooded cave system, beneath the exposed stretches of the Euphrates River, survey teams encountered an object that immediately shifted the tone of the investigation. Resting in a shallow basin carved into stone, half submerged in mineral-rich water, lay a golden chalice. It was not large, but it was unmistakably deliberate in design. The cup's structure showed symmetry and fine craftsmanship, inconsistent with crude or utilitarian vessels. Despite corrosion around the base, the upper rim retained visible engravings. Once carefully cleaned and scanned, inscriptions in ancient Hebrew and Aramaic began to emerge. 3 phrases were repeated around the rim. Covenant blood, kingdom to come. The words alone were enough to intensify debate. Scholars quickly urged caution. Preliminary stylistic analysis suggested the chalice could date to the Second Temple period. Similar metallurgical composition and inscription techniques have been documented in ceremonial vessels from that era. The cave's proximity to historical trade corridors could support the idea that the object was hidden during regional conflict, perhaps during invasions that threatened sacred artifacts. There is no verified chain of custody, no direct inscription linking it to a specific biblical event, no definitive proof of extraordinary origin. And yet the symbolism is difficult to overlook. In Christian tradition, a chalice associated with covenant and blood inevitably evokes the Last Supper, the moment Jesus declared a new covenant before his crucifixion. The concept of a Holy Grail has evolved through centuries of legend literature and theological reflection. While mainstream historians reject the literal existence of a preserved Grail artifact, believers often regard the symbol as spiritually significant. If this chalice is simply a ceremonial cup from the Second Temple era, it remains an important archaeological discovery. But if it carried deeper covenant meaning, why was it concealed beneath layers of sediment inside a cave beneath a river tied so strongly to prophetic boundaries? Geologists note that caves along the Euphrates have shifted dramatically due to fluctuating water levels over centuries. Flooding events could have carried artifacts into hidden recesses. The chalice may have been stored intentionally for protection and later lost as terrain changed. Still, the timing unsettles observers. The river declines, sealed chambers are detected. Ancient weapons rise, and now a golden vessel inscribed with covenant language surfaces in darkness long untouched. No official authority has declared it sacred. No institution has authenticated it as legendary. For now, it remains an artifact under study suspended between history and interpretation. But the question lingers. When a river long associated with restraint begins revealing objects tied to covenant and blood, is it coincidence of erosion or convergence of symbol and moment? The chalice was not the only unsettling sign to surface. Shortly after, reports of unusual artifacts and underground vibration sections of the Euphrates River began to change color. What had once reflected brown and green tones from sediment and algae now appeared dark red in certain stretches, sometimes faint, sometimes deep, spreading evenly through the current, rather than sitting on the surface like stirred mud. Local residents noticed first. Fishermen hesitated before casting nets. Farmers paused before drawing irrigation water. The red tint moved with the flow, not clumped, not isolated. Environmental officials suggested explanations. Mineral runoff, algae bloom, oxidized sediment released from newly exposed banks. In regions experiencing rapid ecological shifts, such discoloration is not impossible. But then something else happened. Hundreds of frogs began appearing along a narrow section of the riverbank, not scattered randomly, but concentrated heavily in one stretch where the water discoloration had been most visible. Biologists pointed to fluctuating water levels disrupting amphibian habitats. And lower water may have forced breeding clusters into tighter areas. Environmental stress can drive unusual animal behavior. Scientifically, it was explainable. Symbolically, it felt familiar. In the book of Exodus, 8 frogs filled the land during one of the 10 plagues of Egypt. The river turning to blood preceded it. The sequence red water, then frogs, is etched deeply into biblical memory. No official authority declared this a plague. No credible scientist claimed supernatural cause, and yet images of red water flowing beneath desert light, while frogs gathered in unnatural density, stirred something beyond laboratory analysis. Patterns matter. Water changes color. Amphibians swarm. The river long associated with prophetic restraint declines further. Environmental models can account for each factor independently. But when events align in sequence color shift, followed by biological surge, observers naturally ask whether the timing carries weight beyond chemistry and climate. Ancient calamities were not always immediate destruction. Often they began with signs of environmental disturbances that unsettled before they overwhelmed. Is this merely ecological imbalance responding to human interference and climate change? Or is it a visual reminder echoing through history? For now, the river flows on red hues, fading and returning in cycles. Frogs dispersing as quickly as they gathered. But memory lingers longer than water. Like this video, share your thoughts below, subscribe, and stay with us. Because what surfaces next pushes the symbolism even further. As water levels continued to decline in certain stretches, a massive formation began to surface from beneath layers of sediment in a mineral-heavy zone near the riverbed. At first glance, it resembled charred timber darkened by time. But closer inspection revealed something more unusual, a surface textured like mineralized bone, fractured yet unified, extending horizontally across a broad section of exposed ground. Its exterior was coated with thick salt deposits and sulfur-like crystallization, hardened by years of evaporation and extreme environmental conditions. These mineral layers formed irregular ridges along the structure's contours, creating the visual impression of ribs or vertebrae embedded in earth. From certain angles, the formation appeared disturbingly organic, as though something once living had been preserved beneath salt and time. Geologists offered grounded explanations. Petrified wood subjected to pressure, heat, and mineral saturation can fracture into patterns that resemble bone. In arid river systems, fluctuating water levels accelerate mineral crystallization. The Euphrates Basin, especially in high salinity zones, is known for rapid mineral deposition when water recedes. From a scientific standpoint, so the formation does not violate geological principles. And yet pause for a moment. Look at the imagery. A vast bone-like structure rising from salt-encrusted ground along one of the most historically significant rivers in the ancient world. The Euphrates is mentioned repeatedly in biblical texts, often associated with boundaries, empires, and prophetic symbolism. In the book of Ezekiel 37, the prophet describes a valley of dry bones, scattered remains, symbolizing restoration after judgment. Scholars are clear that this passage is metaphorical, referring to spiritual and national renewal, not a literal geological event. Still, symbolism has a way of resurfacing when landscapes change. Why do these forms appear now as river levels shift and long-buried terrain becomes visible? Why do mineral fractures resemble skeletal imagery so closely? Why does exposure occur precisely as environmental stress reshapes one of history's most referenced waterways? There is no inscription carved into this structure, no artifact attached to it, no embedded tool or remnant that declares a defined meaning. It is simply mineralized matter revealed by natural processes. Perhaps it is only geology, perhaps salt crystallization and sediment compression shaped the resemblance entirely by coincidence. But when the earth reveals formations that mirror ancient imagery so closely, even cautious observers pause before dismissing the symbolism outright. The Euphrates has long represented division, empire, and prophecy in historical texts. Now, as its waters recede, it exposes shapes that resemble remnants of something long dead, preserved in salt and sediment. Is this nothing more than natural mineralization, or does the landscape sometimes echo the narratives humanity has carried for thousands of years? The structure remains under scientific study. The interpretation remains open. Not far from the exposed bone-like formation along the river, another structure began drawing quiet attention. As sections of mud dried and cracked under the desert sun, a pale yellow crystalline mass pushed upward from the sediment. At first, it appeared like hardened foam frozen in place. But as researchers cleared more of the surrounding soil, its shape became more defined, curved, coiled, rising slightly at one end as though frozen mid-motion. The surface was thickly coated in salt crystals layered tightly together, refracting light in sharp angles. In several areas, sulfur traces were detected within the mineral crust. The concentration was unusually dense even for a region known for saline deposits. Geologists responded quickly. Rapid mineral crystallization can occur when highly saline groundwater evaporates under intense heat. The Dead Sea Basin is one of the most mineral-rich environments on Earth. When underground salt pockets are exposed to air and moisture fluctuations, crystallized formations can expand quickly and dramatically. In simple terms, it could be chemistry. But when viewed from a distance, the mass bore an unsettling resemblance to a coiled body, elongated, rounded, almost serpentine in silhouette. The shape was not perfectly symmetrical, yet it was distinct enough to stir imagination. And in that region, imagination is rarely disconnected from memory. In the book of Genesis 19, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah is described with imagery of sulfur and burning. The land left behind was marked by salt and desolation. Over centuries, salt became a symbol of judgment preservation through devastation. Again, no scientist has linked this formation to any biblical event. No authority has suggested supernatural cause. Salt rises from soil in this region frequently. Sulfur deposits are well documented, yet timing adds tension. Water recedes, sediment collapses, structures once hidden beneath mud emerge. And now, from the same landscape historically associated with fire and salt, a crystallized mass rises in coiled form. It may be nothing more than mineral response to environmental exposure. But when salt climbs upward from beneath the earth instead of washing downward into water, the visual carries weight. In ancient language, salt preserved and warned. It marked covenant and consequence. Today it may simply reflect evaporation and pressure. Still, as rivers shift and sealed places open, each new exposure seems to echo the same theme. What was once covered is no longer staying hidden. Of all the discoveries recorded during the drone's descent beneath the Euphrates River, None provoked more unease than what appeared in the final sequence of footage. Half buried in sediment, tilted slightly to one side, lay a stone statue. At first glance, it resembled a winged humanoid figure, but as the drone adjusted its angle and increased light exposure, details sharpened. The wings were extended but not in flight, rigid, almost restrained. The torso was elongated, carved with sharp edges rather than flowing lines. And the face was distorted, not damaged by erosion, but sculpted with exaggerated features. Hollowed eyes, a tightened mouth, an expression frozen somewhere between anguish and defiance. There was no pedestal, no inscription, no identifiable deity markings matching known Mesopotamian figures. More striking than the figure itself was its position. The statue did not appear toppled by collapse. It looked intentionally placed and then submerged. Surrounding sediment suggested long-term burial rather than recent displacement. Portions of the wings were encased in mineral crust, as though sealed over centuries by water pressure and silt accumulation. Archaeologists immediately cautioned against sensational interpretation. Winged figures are common throughout ancient Near Eastern art. Assyrian, Babylonian, and Persian cultures frequently depicted hybrid beings. Protective spirits and symbolic guardians often bore wings,